Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of absolute precision.
Oh, for sure. It feels very much like engineering.
Right, like you fall off your skateboard, you break your arm, you go to a hospital, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line right across the bone.
It's super clear. The
Yep.
doctor just points a pen at the screen. He goes, there it is. There's your problem.
Exactly. It's this very comforting binary thing. The bone is broken or it's intact. But then you step out of the hospital and into, the actual messy, chaotic reality of human behavior.
Which is an entirely different universe.
Totally. You try to figure out why we actually do the things we do every single day, and suddenly that x-ray machine is just, it's completely useless. You can't put human motivation under a microscope.
No, you really can't. We naturally gravitate toward things that can be quantified or put into a neat little spreadsheet. But with human behavior, we are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely invisible.
And incredibly murky, which is why I am so hyped for this deep dive. Honestly, I am genuinely thrilled to have you listening today because we are venturing into some profoundly complex territory.
It really is the absolute definition of muddy waters. We're
Yeah.
dealing with moving target subjective realities.
Yeah, but dissecting that complexity is exactly why we're here. If you're out there trying to figure out the underlying mechanics of your own life, if you want to understand your actual operating system without all the boring academic jargon, you are in exactly the right place.
It's going to be a fun one.
Okay, let's unpack this. My personal mission for you today is to equip you with a new lens, like a framework to finally see the invisible forces that are dictating almost everything in your world.
Everything from your career choices to your dating life.
Oh, definitely your dating life and your late-night doom-scrolling habits. And to build this lens, we are tearing into some truly legendary source material. We're looking at Tony Robbins' TED Talk.
Which is widely known as Why We Do What We Do.
Right. Or sometimes people call it the invisible force. And we absolutely have to set the stage here because the context of this specific talk is just mind-blowing.
The constraints he was under were insane.
Right. Tony Robbins is a guy who normally does 50-hour immersion seminars. 50 hours.
He explicitly notes that, too. He does weekend immersions because you don't just learn a new language or rewire your psychology by reading a list. You have to get in the room.
You have to drill it until it becomes visceral. And yet, here he is at TED, tasked with condensing his entire life's philosophy into 18 minutes.
It's a masterclass in high-density knowledge compression. He actually jokes during the talk about feeling sympathetic for the physicist who had to explain Einstein's theory of relativity in that exact same time slot.
Because it's impossible to compress a 50-hour physiologically exhausting seminar into 18 minutes means stripping away every single piece of fluff.
What you're left with is just the pure, unadulterated core of his framework.
So let's start with an analogy. Think of your brain, your intellect, your logic as the ultimate hardware. It is this incredibly powerful, state-of-the-art supercomputer sitting in your skull.
Tons of processing power.
Endless storage, right. But your emotions are the operating system. And it does not matter how advanced your hardware is, the operating system dictates what software is even allowed to run.
That is a highly functional analogy.
Yeah.
Because you can have a supercomputer, but if the OS is glitching, or if it has a background process prioritizing, say, basic survival over high-level optimization, the hardware's potential is entirely bottlenecked.
Yes.
You can't run the build a thriving startup software if your operating system is stuck in a panic about social rejection loop.
Which brings us right to dismantling this massive assumption that I think a lot of us, especially in the Gen Z demographic, have been raised to believe.
The information age illusion.
Exactly. We have this deeply ingrained idea that logic, data, and being smart are the ultimate cheat codes for success. Like, if I just consume enough Wikipedia articles or ask AI to optimize my schedule, I'll naturally make the right choices and my life will be perfect.
Robbins comes out swinging against that immediately.
Yeah.
He points out a glaring flaw. If intellect were enough, the world would be perfect.
Right. Most of the people sitting in that TED audience are literal geniuses, billionaires, innovators, scientists.
Yeah, but are their personal lives flawless? Are they immune to depression or divorce or addiction? No.
So if intellect isn't running the show, what actually is?
Well, Robbins establishes his foundational premise by actively rejecting a label that people force on him. He explicitly states he is not a motivator.
Yeah, people always pigeonhole him as this ultimate hype man, the guy who gets you to jump up and down.
But he calls himself the why guy. He wants to uncover the motive for action, not 10 years ago, but right now, today. What invisible force is activated in you right this second? And his core thesis, which, by the way, challenges a lot of classical economic theory, is that emotion is the force of life.
Emotion is the force of life, not intellect, emotion.
And classical economics hates this. For decades, models were built on homo economicus, the perfectly rational human maximizing utility.
But humans are so irrational.
Demonstrably irrational. Intellect is just a tool. With our conscious minds, we can rationalize absolutely anything. Staying in a terrible relationship, eating garbage, procrastinating. We do things that are objectively terrible for us all the time.
Because when emotion enters the picture, the fundamental wiring of the brain actually changes.
Yeah.
But let's drill into that for a second. When you say the wiring functionally changes, we're not just talking about a mood swing, right?
No, we're talking about actual neurological shifts. When a strong emotional trigger hits intense fear, blinding anger, passionate infatuation, the amygdala activates.
The brain's threat detection center.
Right. And when it fires at a high intensity, it initiates a cascade of neurotransmitters that effectively hijacks the prefrontal cortex.
Which is the hardware we talked about, the seat of logic and impulse control.
Exactly. So the neural pathways that prioritize long-term logical consequences are literally suppressed, and the pathways prioritizing immediate emotional resolution take over. You lose access to your highest rational functioning.
I mean, I hear that, but I'm not entirely sold on it being an absolute rule. I want to play devil's advocate here because it sounds like we're just helpless victims to our biology. Let's use a super relatable Gen Z example.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's 2:00 a.m. You're lying in bed. You know you shouldn't text your toxic ex.
Oh boy.
Your intellect says, absolutely not. This will ruin your entire week. Your friends have literally staged interventions. The data is clear. But then that wave of 2:00 a.m. loneliness hits. Emotion enters the chat. And despite all your logic, your thumb just sends the you up text anyway.
A classic failure of the prefrontal cortex.
Right. So if our biology is hijacking us like that, how do we actually harness this emotional force instead of just falling victim to it?
Well, the feeling of being a helpless victim only exists when you're ignorant of the underlying code. It's like being in a self-driving car heading toward a cliff.
Yeah.
If you don't know where the override panel is, you feel helpless.
That makes sense.
This is why Robbins is so obsessed with uncovering the why. You cannot harness the emotion until you understand what specific fundamental need that emotion is desperately trying to fulfill.
So the late night text isn't actually about the ex?
Rarely. It is about an unmet emotional need screaming for attention. A sudden deficit of connection, or a need for the certainty of a familiar interaction, even if it's painful. We have to explore where we are emotionally, not just to help ourselves, but to truly appreciate the drives of others. What's fascinating here is how Robbins connects this to technology. And keep in mind, he delivered this talk well before algorithmic social media totally saturated our lives.
Oh, his warning was incredibly prescient. It feels like a warning label for the modern internet.
It does. He warned that we are more technologically connected than any generation in history. But if we don't understand the emotional drives of others, that very technology will only magnify the challenges and divisions in society.
Because connection doesn't automatically equal understanding.
Exactly. It just amplifies whatever emotional state is currently driving the user.
It's algorithmic living. The platforms are designed to harvest our underlying emotions, like a desperate need for significance or simmering anger for engagement. So if emotion is the engine and intellect is just the steering wheel we barely touch, we need to figure out where we are actually driving.
Which leads to what Robbins calls the two master lessons of life.
Right, because society has basically tricked us into obsessing over the wrong destination.
The first master lesson is the science of achievement. This is what our educational systems and corporate ladders are built around. Taking the invisible, a thought, a dream, and making it visible in physical reality.
Building a profitable business, becoming an influencer, making a ton of money. And he looks at that TED audience and says, look, most of you have completely mastered this.
Because achievement is a science. There are rules. There are predictable, sequential steps. You identify a market gap, write the code, get venture capital, and launch.
It's mechanistic, cause and effect. But the friction comes when we realize you can execute the science flawlessly and still feel completely empty.
Precisely. Which brings us to the second master lesson, the one that's incredibly rare to see mastered today, the art of fulfillment.
The contrast between science and art here is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Let's break that down for the listener.
It's vital because it explains the fundamental error in how we pursue happiness. Science is rigid and predictable. Art is nuanced, internal, highly subjective. What fulfills you might completely bore me.
So it's not a 10-step checklist.
No, it's an internal state built on two pillars, appreciation and contribution. You can master the science of achievement, have the billion-dollar valuation and the massive following, and still be profoundly miserable if you haven't cultivated the art of fulfillment.
And this is where he drops this gut-wrenching contrast. He talks about people who have been given literally everything. The people born on third base, they have the trust funds, the elite tutors, a loving family.
The ultimate frictionless setup for achievement.
Yes, but how many of those exact people spend their entire adult lives in and out of rehab centers, utterly hollow inside?
It's a tragic paradox. They have all the visible markers of success, but their operating system is fundamentally broken. And he immediately juxtaposes them with the exact opposite extreme, people who have suffered what he calls ultimate pain.
Abuse, unimaginable trauma, starting life with negative resources.
And yet, paradoxically, individuals from these exact harrowing backgrounds often become society's greatest contributors and healers.
Okay, I have to pause here. Because we are wading into deep waters regarding trauma, and I want to handle this carefully. The cultural conversation around trauma has shifted massively since he gave this talk.
It really has.
There's this prevailing narrative today, especially online in therapy culture, that your trauma is your defining characteristic. People put their diagnoses in their bios like astrological signs. And Robbins pushes back hard against the idea that biography is destiny. But isn't it incredibly difficult to tell someone in deep pain that they're essentially choosing their trajectory?
It is exceptionally difficult, and it's a huge point of cultural friction. But let's clarify what he's not saying. He is not invalidating clinical therapy. He isn't saying trauma doesn't cause profound damage that needs treatment.
Right.
What he is vigorously rejecting is the deterministic victimhood narrative. The idea that because a terrible thing happened, your future potential is forever capped. Treating your biography as your destiny robs you of your agency.
It's a brutal but liberating truth.
If you choose to live entirely in the narrative of your past, of course your past will equal your future. But the existence of people who have suffered ultimate pain and transformed themselves into massive contributors is the living proof that the cycle can be broken.
Which flips the script on the primary excuse humanity uses to justify staying stuck. So if our past doesn't rigidly define our future, what is the default excuse people fall back on when they fail?
Without fail, they blame a lack of resources.
Always. He even crowdsources this in real time. He asks the audience why they failed, and they shout back, "I didn't have enough time, enough money, the right technology."
Someone even jokes, "I didn't have the Supreme Court."
Which is hilarious, but Robbins points out that all these excuses have one thing in common. They are all claims of missing external resources. And his nuance is great here because he concedes the point. He says, you might actually be flat broke. You might genuinely only have 2 free hours a week.
But a lack of resources is never the defining factor for failure. Never.
The defining factor is always resourcefulness. Here's where it's really interesting for the listener, because I want to use a modern analogy to lock this in. Think about the gaming community. There's this subculture of gamers who do no-hit, zero-inventory speedruns.
I'm not totally immersed in that world. How does that work?
So in a massive, brutally hard game like Elden Ring, the normal way to play is to collect heavy armor, upgrade weapons, gather healing potions. Those are your resources. But speedrunners intentionally strip all that away. They enter the hardest boss fights completely naked, wielding a basic wooden stick with 0 healing items.
Logically, they should be obliterated.
Instantly. They have 0 external resources. But they win faster than anyone else. Why? Because of sheer, unbelievable internal resourcefulness. They spend hundreds of hours learning every pixel of the attack patterns. Their internal emotional state, their focus, their resilience completely overrides their lack of in-game items. And Robbins is arguing that life and business operate on that exact same mechanic.
That is a brilliant translation. The speedrunner's internal state renders the armor obsolete. Robbins defines resourcefulness not as a skill you learn in a textbook, but as an emotional state. Human emotion is the ultimate limitless resource.
So if you're stubborn enough or playful enough, you'll find a way through any barrier.
Exactly. If you don't have capital, but you are relentlessly resourceful, you will figure out how to bootstrap or convince someone to fund you. Emotion conjures resources out of thin air.
He uses this historical example of a political debate, pointing out to a politician in the audience that this specific candidate had all the intellect in the world, the data, the policies. But because they couldn't access the right emotional state during the debate, they came across as wooden, the audience couldn't connect.
The lack of the right emotion actively blocked the audience from experiencing the resource of the politician's intelligence. It's a failure of the operating system, preventing the hardware from shining.
You could have $1 million, but if you're paralyzed by anxiety, you can't build anything. So, $1 million question. If resourcefulness is an emotional state, how do we actually access it? We can't just snap our fingers and say, okay, I'm relentlessly determined now.
No, you can't. Robbins says we unlock it through micro decisions. Decisions, not external conditions, shape our destiny. We are fundamentally decision-making machines, making 3 specific decisions every millisecond.
And these 3 decisions are the hands on the steering wheel of our lives. Let's dissect them. What's decision number 1?
What are you going to focus on? Right now, your brain has to filter billions of bits of sensory data. Are you focusing on the past, which you can't change, or the present? Are you focusing on what you possess, or obsessing over what is missing?
And this happens instantly. You walk into a party, do you focus on the one person frowning or the music? Your focus dictates your reality in that room.
Precisely. And the millisecond your brain locks onto a focal point, it makes the second decision. What does this mean?
The meaning. I want to slow down here because assigning meaning feels so automatic it's hard to recognize it as a decision. How does that machinery work?
The brain is a massive prediction machine. When you focus on an event, your hippocampus searches your database of past experiences. It asks, have we seen this before? And based on that, you assign a meaning. Is this sudden rainstorm a disaster or an opportunity to read a book? Is my boss's harsh feedback the end of my career or the beginning of my growth?
So the meaning is literally a story we project onto a neutral event.
Yes. This raises an important question, though, because whatever meaning you assign, it instantly and automatically produces an emotion. Meaning equals emotion.
So the meaning is the trigger for the neurochemical cascade.
Exactly. If your startup fails and you assign the meaning, I am a fundamental failure, your brain releases chemicals for despair and shame. If you assign the meaning, this was an expensive education, your brain releases chemicals for curiosity and resilience. The external event is identical.
But the internal emotional state is entirely different. And that emotion dictates the third decision.
What are you going to do? The action. Focus leads to meaning. Meaning creates emotion. Emotion drives action.
Focus.
Meaning.
Action. The actual cheat code to human behavior. And Robbins uses Lance Armstrong to prove this isn't just theoretical. Now, obviously, this talk was years before the doping scandals and the Oprah interview, but we're just analyzing his psychological framework in a medical crisis.
And the framework holds up.
He gets diagnosed with severe testicular cancer that has spread to his brain and lungs. For most people, the focus narrows to the illness. The meaning is, this is the end. The action is checking out.
But his internal decisions were radically different. Focus shifted to what he needed to do medically. The meaning he assigned wasn't an end. It was a beginning, a profound battle.
And the action was developing incredible emotional fitness, eventually winning 7 Tour de France championships races he never won before cancer. Again, separating the controversy, the mechanics of surviving that trauma were driven by focus, meaning, and action.
He also mentions Rosa Parks. Sitting on that bus, her focus locked onto the sheer injustice. The meaning she assigned wasn't, I should comply to stay safe. It was, my dignity matters and I cannot tolerate this.
Which generated righteous resolve. And her action. She refused to move. That micro-decision shaped the entire cultural landscape of the U.S.
Same with the Google founders. They could have sold out early, but their focus was long-term utility. The meaning was they were building a culture, not just a product. Monumental outcomes stemming from the exact same 3 micro decisions you make when deciding what to eat for breakfast.
The world is dangerous, and the other mean, I'm lucky to be alive. Why are our default meanings so different?
This is the deepest layer of his framework, his model of the world, the invisible filter of reality. It has 3 parts. The fuel, which are the emotional states, the map, which is your core beliefs, and the target.
The gravitational center, the 6 human needs.
Yes. And he distinguishes between needs and desires. Desires are things you want, like a vacation. Needs are psychological oxygen. You must have them. The first 4 are needs of the personality. Every human finds a way to meet these, positively or highly destructively.
Okay, let's unpack these, because the listener is definitely going to start seeing the invisible architecture of their life right now. Need number 1, certainty.
The foundational survival need. The need to avoid pain and maintain comfort. Predictability. If you aren't certain the roof will hold up, Your brain can't focus on anything else.
We crave that stable ground. We need to know the paycheck will clear.
But how people meet it varies wildly. Some become micromanagers, some develop a specialized skill. But it goes dark, too. Some people give up on their dreams because there's massive certainty in failure.
It's predictable.
Robbins even points out some people smoke just to get a guaranteed chemical reaction. Instant certainty.
But the irony is, what happens if you achieve total certainty? If you know exactly how every day will unfold forever?
You'd rot from the inside out. Agonizingly bored.
Total certainty equals total boredom, which is why we have the second need. Uncertainty or variety.
We are biologically wired for surprise. A flat heartbeat means you're dead.
And he asks the audience, how many of you love surprises? Every hand goes up. And he immediately calls them out. He says, no, you don't. You only like the surprises you want. The surprises you don't want, you call problems.
It's a brilliant observation. We claim to want variety, but only on our terms. But we require friction to stay engaged, like rewatching a movie. We know it's good certainty, or hope we forgot some details. Variety.
Bouncing between safety and chaos. So how do we anchor our identity? Need number 3. The driver of modern madness. Significance.
The desperate need to feel special, unique, needed, standing out from the tribe.
You can get it by working 80 hours a week to buy a yacht, or by tearing down the yacht owner on social media, or by being the most humble person in yoga class, or, as Robbins jokes, getting tattoos in places humans generally don't want to know about.
The vehicle doesn't matter. The message is, look at me. But this is where Robbins takes a necessary dark turn. What is the fastest way to achieve absolute significance if you have no money, education, or hope?
Violence.
Violence. If someone walks up to you in a dark alley and puts a gun to your head, instantly they're a 10 out of 10 on the significance scale. They're the most important person in your universe.
It's terrifying, but it removes the mystery of evil.
It explains the mechanics. The gun provides certainty. They know you'll comply. It provides uncertainty, adrenaline, what happens next, and immense significance. They'll risk prison because it satisfies 3 core needs instantly.
It explains toxic interpersonal stuff, too, starting screaming matches just to force significance and variety. But if significance makes us unique, uniqueness separates us. So we need the 4th need to pull us back to the tribe: connection and love.
We are wired for love. But Robbins observes that most people settle for connection because actual love is too terrifying.
Because you have to drop the armor, you have to risk getting emotionally annihilated.
And everyone has been hurt. He asks the TED crowd who has been hurt in a relationship, and they all laugh. To avoid that pain, to maintain certainty, people step back from love and settle for connection.
Gen Z culture and social media are the perfect example. Clout chasing on TikTok. A teenager goes viral, they get a massive dopamine hit of significance, millions of eyeballs, and massive digital connection through comments and likes. But it is completely void of actual love. It's a synthetic replacement. We're gorging on digital connection because it's metabolically safer.
Parasocial relationships are the ultimate safe connection. Zero vulnerability required.
Oh, and I have to mention his joke here. He says if nothing else works for connection, just get a dog. He specifically says do not get a cat. Because you can take the trash out for 2 minutes, and when you come back, the dog loses its mind like you've been deployed for 6 months.
It's a great tension breaker. So those are the needs of the personality: certainty, uncertainty, significance, connection. Meeting these will keep you alive. They might make you successful in achievement, but they will never, ever bring you fulfillment.
Never. You can max them out and still be miserable. To unlock fulfillment, you have to graduate to the needs of the spirit.
Need number 5, growth. Non-negotiable. Everything is growing or dying. If you as an individual aren't expanding your capacity, no amount of significance will save you from feeling like hell.
You're growing or dying, but why? And that leads to the ultimate human need: contribution.
The secret to living is giving.
Which sounds like a cheap coffee mug quote, and he admits that.
He does, but you have to look at the truth beneath it. Life is about we, not me. We grow so we have something of value to give away. Contribution naturally elevates all the other needs positively.
And this brings us to the emotional climax of the deep dive: the Thanksgiving story.
It perfectly demonstrates the framework in real time.
Tony is 11, Thanksgiving Day. Family is utterly destitute, 0 food. Parents are having a massive toxic fight, total pain, 0 resources. There's a knock on the door. His dad opens it, and a stranger is standing there with a massive box containing a complete Thanksgiving meal.
Now, look at the divergent destinies based on the 3 decisions. What did the father's focus lock onto?
He totally bypassed the food. His focus locked onto the fact that this was charity.
And what meaning did his brain assign to that?
The most destructive one, he decided it meant, I am worthless, I have failed as a man.
Which produced deep shame and anger.
Hmm.
And that emotion dictated his action, which was,
He left. He walked out and abandoned the family.
but look at 11-year-old Tony in the same room. What did his young brain focus on?
Abundance. He was just like, holy crap, there is food.
And what meaning did he assign to the stranger, the literal turning point of his destiny?
He assigned an empowering meaning. He decided it meant strangers care. People who owe us nothing are looking out for us.
Which produced profound gratitude. And the action, if strangers care about me, I must care about them. Someday, I'm going to make a difference.
The contrast is staggering. Exact same event. The father destroys his family because his need for significance and certainty was threatened. The boy launches a destiny of contribution. By 17, he bought groceries and fed 2 families himself, then 4, then 8.
He didn't tell anyone, so it wasn't for significance. It was purely contribution. Eventually, he scaled it, got friends involved, started a foundation. 18 years later, his foundation fed 2 million people in 35 countries in a single year.
2 million people, traced back to the micro decisions an 11-year-old boy made about a turkey.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this story proves emotion overrides intellect. Internal resourcefulness overcomes a lack of physical resources. It demonstrates the power of focus, meaning, and action. And it proves that fulfilling the spiritual need of contribution is what shapes a legacy.
It's genuinely awe-inspiring. We've covered an immense amount of ground. We threw out the X-ray machine and realized emotion is the engine. We learned to chase the art of fulfillment, not just the science of achievement. We replaced the no resources myth with the superpower of resourcefulness.
We mapped the 3 micro decisions, focus, meaning, action, and the 6 fundamental human needs that keep your hardware running and make the journey worthwhile.
So what does this all mean for you? I want to leave you with a final provocative thought experiment. Robin shows us that our primary driving need dictates our destiny. But those needs can shift. If your primary needs secretly shifted overnight from, say, a desperate need for certainty to a burning need for significance, how would that fundamentally rewire your map of the world tomorrow? Would you quit your corporate job? End a stagnant relationship? What invisible need is secretly in the driver's seat of your life right now?
Identifying that lead need is the first step to taking the wheel back. Once you know what your OS is optimizing for, you can write your own code.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep analyzing your operating system, and never stop seeking those aha moments. We'll catch you on the next one.